All right, guys, welcome back to Vets for Vets in the Philippines. Today we're in the head shed and we got a real great opportunity. I have Captain Yancy Caruthers, who I had the great opportunity to serve with during our OIF missions back at Fort Riley. So he's been brave enough to volunteer to get on here and share his story. So everybody, just welcome Yancy to the channel. And Yancy, I thank you for taking the time to visit with me and the guys out there and the gals that are chasing after the channel and seeing what we're doing.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we got a little bit of
Yeah,
time.
just
We got a little bit of time
you
lag,
and
so
I
we'll
serving
get
in
used
Fort
to it.
Riley together. That was 2003, maybe 2003 and 2004. So it's
Yep.
been a few days.
It's been a few days, yeah. Well, Nancy, the kind of way I do it is I just kind of let you kind of go. I'll hit a few questions for you. Maybe you could just kind of tell. I know your story in the OIF section of when we was in 2005, 2006, 4, 5, and 6 when we were doing deployments for there at the uh, Logistics Supply Battalion where we was at. But why don't you just give a little brief entry of what got you in the military, what you started at, your MOS as you originally started. Tell a little bit about it and kind of work your way up to the time we got together, and then we'll visit a little bit about it, and then we'll move on from there and see where you're at today.
Well, I have to say I did not necessarily take the traditional military career track. I enlisted when I was 17, and I spent 8.5 years as an enlisted soldier as a medic, specialized medic in orthopedics.
Mm.
And then after a couple of years, I switched over to licensed practical nurse, which I think at the time, I don't even know that it was at the time it was 91 Charlie. I don't know what it is now. It's 91. Now it's 68 whiskey something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But after a few years of that, I went on and I put myself through RN school, and I accepted a commission that finally went through, I think, in '97, which was kind of interesting, being a butter bar, but they left me in the same platoon. They just put me in the front of it, which I thought that would be a little bit more of a challenge, but it turned out to be an advantage because all of my folks, they knew the kind of soldier I was, and it just seemed like it was a natural fit. Then I guess, of course, I just sort of existed for a while as a platoon leader. Then they eventually, the unit went to Kosovo, and I didn't. I got stuck as the company commander of the rear deck at that point, and did my company command time as a first lieutenant, which was also just a little bit interesting. But got that out of the way, and then that's right about the time that I had a battalion commander that he and I work together about like landmines and small children.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to work out. So I had served with Chuck O'Leary, Colonel O'Leary at the time when he was a major.
Yep.
Because he was parked in our medical unit because he didn't have a unit to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And he had then when he'd found his way to the unit that you and I served together with
Right.
him. For some reason or other, I was talking to him, and he says, "Come on up here. You gotta, I'll make a spot for you in my S3 shop."
Yeah.
And I was a little hesitant to do so, but he was trying real hard to get me to be the aide de camp for General Zink.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really want to take that job because I knew it'd be a lot of responsibility, and I had a lot of things going on in my life at the time.
Yeah.
My last new baby, new marriage, all of that stuff was
Yeah.
going on at once. And what the colonel couldn't tell me is that we were all getting ready to get mobilized to Fort Riley.
Yeah.
And he couldn't just come out and tell me that, but what he was trying to do is get me in a position that, that I could succeed at Riley.
Right. Right. You'd
And
still
as
be
you
in
know, I
home
was a little
station.
bit of a fish out of water. I was an Army Nurse Corps officer stuck as an assistant operations officer in a logistics battalion. I was about as far out of my MOS range
Yeah.
as a person could get. But, as you know, there's a job to do, and you do it. And the particular position that we were in, our S3 wasn't as enthusiastic about being there, and he had some things going on, and ended up getting cutting that mobilization short, which left me an O2 out of branch in an O4 position.
Right.
Well, apparently just surviving in that kind of a position for very long, I mean, it gets people's attention.
Yeah, true.
And about a year or two after that, it was late 2005, I got a call kind of out of the blue from a chief of staff of the 3rd COSCOM who said, can you do medical logistics? And I said, well, I suppose I could do about anything you asked me to do. And they had drawn my name to do medical logistics for the 3rd COSCOM in Iraq.
Yeah.
And mobilized me for that. I mean, it was a Friday. I think I got the call on a Friday, and he says, when can you be here? And I was like, well, I guess I can't do yesterday.
Yeah.
But I want to say I called on a Friday, left on a Tuesday morning. It was all really, really fast. Got up to Fort McCoy, and they just looked at me all cross-eyed like, well, what are we going to do with you? Because we're all ready to go to Iraq.
Yeah.
And you've got to go through all of this training, all this stuff, the things that we used to do when we were at Riley.
Right. Doing your pre-mob. Yeah.
And sent me to pre-mob at Fort Bliss for 2 weeks, where I hooked up with a bunch of doctors.
Yeah.
So, of course, they fast-tracked us through everything.
Everything.
We ended up landing in Iraq right about the time the advanced party was figuring out where they were in the world.
Wow.
I was landing there. So ended up not doing well. I ran into the guy, the very same guy who said, you're never going to be ready to go with us. I ran into him. I got to Iraq 12 hours. I was on post 12 hours before he got there, and he was part of the advanced party.
Wow.
So I said, here I am. You're the guy who told me that I couldn't possibly be ready to be here, and I'm here 12 hours before you.
Yeah.
So apparently the medical logistics job had dissolved sometime in the 2 weeks, and they said, well, what are we going to do with you? I said, well, you better do something with me because it worked awful hard to get here.
Get here.
And they attached to us the division surgeon. And I thought, well, okay, it was more of an advisory capacity than anything else. We weren't going to do it hands-on medical.
Right.
But as an advisory capacity for a core support command, it was kind of a big job. And the nice part about that job is that we kind of sat down and we got to invent it. The colonel that was there, 06, he says, what do we want to do? What do we want to accomplish while we're here? And then that was kind of the end of, like, well, what do you mean, sir? Is there no op order? There's no nothing. So we got to sort of define what our role was going to be in that advisory capacity. We ended up doing a lot of emergency management exercises at the base. We did a little bit of off-base liaison stuff, or we kind of attached ourselves. When you work for a one-star,
you kind of have a little bit of leadway. Yeah, you just have a little bit of leadway there.
You really do. Yeah, and we just got to kind of attach ourselves to people and say, hey, we want to go do this, help us out doing it. And we did a lot of civilian outreach to some of the Iraqi medical folks.
What area was you located at there in Iraq?
I was in Anaconda, which was about 60, 70 miles north of Baghdad. Right. Great big monster base.
Yep.
But a lot of stuff going on right around it. That was about the same time as the Golden Mosque got bombed.
Yep.
We were there right after that.
Yeah.
And, we were out on the road a little bit, but not a ton.
Not a ton, yeah.
So I got a chance to get out and see the country a little bit, but I wasn't on the road every day or any of that stuff. That ended up being just a crazy deployment. Mortar fire every day kind of thing. And, got back from that, and the unit that I was assigned to, because if you recall, in order to pin off captain's parts when you served with me, I had to agree to be reassigned back to the medical unit so I could be in a slot. Yeah. So they kind of said, yeah, we're happy to promote you, but we got to kick you out. So, when I went back to the medical unit, they offered, they asked me if I wanted to do the company command. And I told them, absolutely not. The only way I'll come back is if I can be your S3. They said, what's an S3 do? I thought, But
Yeah.
that worked out really well because, when I came back, I got to I did what an operations officer is supposed to do, and I kind of ran the show
Yeah.
and let somebody else take care of the babysitting, and I took care of the mission, and that
Right.
worked out really well.
Yeah.
And then they turned right around and mobilized us again to Iraq a second time. Almost back-to-back deployments. I think I was home for maybe 9 months.
Yeah.
And then this time I was the chief flight nurse for this sort of newly created flight nurse detachment that we had put together in our combat support hospital. It basically, you hear the stories about a kid that's in the burn center in San Antonio, Texas. 5 days ago, he was got hit with an IED.
Right.
Well, a lot of people don't put 2 and 2 together, and they think, well, 5 days, that means the guy had to get to San Antonio somehow.
Right.
Well, the flight medics that come off the helicopters, they do a phenomenal job of scraping these guys off the battlefield and getting them to the cache. But once you get to the cache, they hook you up to a ventilator.
Yeah.
You're on all these IV drips. You got to get someplace else.
Yep.
The flight medics, that's way out of their element.
Right.
You really need somebody that's they do a fantastic job at what they do.
Right.
I'm not sure I could, feel as comfortable doing as what they do. But once you get to a certain level, they got a lot of medications. Those flight medics, they don't understand how to work that stuff.
Right. Right.
So what Mike did, we did critical care transfer from the Army hospital to where we could rendezvous with the Air Force, and then once you did that, you put them on a C-141 and then flying hospital in the air. But we were like the guys in between.
In between.
The medics would pick them up, bring them to us. We would fly them, put them on the ventilator, do all those things. Well, then we would manage the ventilator, manage the anesthesia, do all of that stuff while we got them to the aircraft. We usually involve maybe a
so you filled that
gap.
You filled that gap between the airlift and getting them headed to stateside. You filled that gap in country.
Exactly. Once we got them to the Air Force, then the Air Force put them on the C-141, took them to launch stool, and then at that point, it's they're way ahead of us at that point.
Sure.
But I'd run it out of a Black Hawk, and one particular night I was giving CPR by myself, titrating anesthesia, and managing a ventilator all at once.
Wow.
And that's something that flight medics train to do that.
Yeah.
So that's what my team and I we did. We did that for about a year.
Wow.
That's what my book Northwest it's all about. It's all about that story of
and I want to take
what I went through to do.
Take the opportunity here that I want to recognize the book that you've written, and you can take a minute and explain about it. And when we're done, I'll get the link from you and I'll post it in there. So you guys look for the link. If you guys want a really good book to read, you got to get this. I mean, to me, it was like writing with you, but seeing it through your eyes. It really told the story of what it meant to be on the ground, doing what you were doing at the time. Excellent reading, guys. You guys has got to get it. You got to read it. It's a great book. I'm not trying to just plug him because he's one of my best friends, but I'm telling you, if you guys want to know what it was like to be on the ground in Iraq, seeing what was happening on the medical side coming through, you guys really got to read the book. So we'll put the link down in the description. But go ahead there, Yancy. Sorry, but I wanted to throw a pitch in there on the book. I wasn't letting you get out of here without a pitch for it. So you just.
Yeah, and the funny thing about writing that book, it took me about 7 years to write it because I knew it was a little different because I knew I was going to write a book the day that I got into Iraq.
Yeah.
Because it was my second deployment, and there was a lot of time. I kept a journal the first time I was there.
Right.
But it was really just for me. It was not ever really meant for public consumption, and I wrote things in it that were kind of personal. And
sure.
It's sealed in an envelope. It's going to be there till the day I die.
Right.
But this, I started writing Northwest of Eden almost as soon as I got into country. Because I already knew that I wanted to write a book about it as it happened.
Right.
So I had no idea how it was going to turn out. I didn't know what sort of stories would be in it.
Right.
I wrote it all at the time, and sometimes I'd work in that, ER for, 14, 15 hours, and then I'd go back to my hooch and I'd sit down and I'd scribble down as many notes I could think of, remember in the day.
Right.
Because again, the book was writing itself as I was living it. But the funny thing is that something like that can be incredibly therapeutic for any kind of trauma that you go through. Just the act of writing it down and making it fit for public consumption.
Yeah.
I came to grips with a lot of the things that I had experienced myself, and that was something I didn't really anticipate. And the second thing that I didn't anticipate is that when I go back and I read my own book that took me a whole 7 years to write, there's a transformation of my character from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Which, of course, it sounds like it'd be self-explanatory because you go to war changes you. But at the same time, I was reading the book at the beginning thinking, man, I was an arrogant SOB,
It does. Most of us don't see those changes till way afterwards.
We
till
really
something draws it out.
In ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see
when
it we'll see it in everybody else, but we just don't see it on ourselves.
A different person at the end, and the book did not end at all the way I thought it was going to end when I started. But what I would tell people to do, if you're a vet and you got a story, sometimes it's hard to sit down and just tell somebody else, especially your loved ones. It's just, they want a story, they want you to talk about it, and you can't talk about it with them. But the funny thing is, man, I ran into a guy who was on the same base I was at the same time. We did not know each other at the time, but I ran into him about 4 years ago, and I discovered that he and I had been in the same place, same time, chewed the same dirt.
Yeah.
We sat down for 3 hours and talked like we'd known each other our whole lives.
Whole lives, exactly.
And vets can do that with each other because there's a shared experience, a shared camaraderie. Our families don't always get that.
Right.
But I think if you can sit down and write your story, or even sit down and talk to a tape recorder or whatever, it's good for you. It's good for you to get that story out, because you get that story out and all of a sudden it becomes, you get separated from it a little bit. It becomes like, okay, that was some years of my life, but it doesn't necessarily have to. It can shape the person that I am today, and it should, but it doesn't have to define
you. Right. Absolutely.
The person that you are today. I mean, an experience like that, it's not necessarily 5 years of trauma, or 5 seconds of trauma. It's more like a year of your life where bad things happen and then nothing happens for days and days and days and days, and then other bad things happen, then sometimes good things happen. Yep. So I mean, it's just a very tumultuous time, emotionally. So it's very hard to understand that even within yourself. But if you sit down and you tell your story to a tape recorder, or you write it down on paper, then all of a sudden it becomes real. It becomes something that isn't. It doesn't feel like a dream or a distant memory. It doesn't. It's there. It's all of a sudden. My book is, 5 inches wide and 10 inches tall and a half an inch thick, and and the story becomes something that I can hold in my hand and I can define.
Right.
And that becomes very, very therapeutic. I mean, even when the experiences sometimes are really, really bad, and even if you don't expect it, anyone's ever going to read it.
Right.
Sit down and write it down. Write down all those things, and just the act of doing that, you look back and you read it. Okay, now this is what it is, and I can deal with it at that point.
Yeah.
So that's the advice I throw at people. I had no idea. Next thing you know, I didn't really market it at all, and there was a 36-hour period. I was on the bestseller list, and I was right ahead of American Sniper.
Wow.
And what was the other one? There was another one. It was a Marcus Luttrell book.
Uh-huh.
There were, and I can't remember the name of it, but I was number one for like 36 hours, and American Sniper was number 2.
Wow.
You know, and it didn't last very long, but I was selling like 200 or 300 books a day for about 3 days, and that was a big surge in front of Veterans Day a few years ago. And after, I don't know, I've probably maybe 3,000 or 4,000 copies since it came out. But I mean, that's been several years ago. You know, I'm not pushing it.
Yeah.
I usually sell enough books every month now. I can go out for a cup of coffee if I want.
There you go. Well, that's cool. Well, you know, you brought up a really good point, Yancy. You know, I look back about 2005, 2006 on myself, and the same thing, you know, and everything that was going on. I ended up going down to Belize, Central America, as you know. And Max Hetherington, the first interview I did on here, talk about 2 different guys, and we only have 2 things that's really in common. 1, we're veterans. 2, we're pilots. And so that's how we kind of even found each other, as being pilots. We were both hanging out at the local airport in Belize, a little bitty FBO that was owned and operated there by the Mennonite community in Spanish Lookout. And that's how we met, you know, right there on the floor. But me and him had one night that his wife was back up in the States, and we just got together. I was house sitting for his neighbor, and we were sitting on the porch smoking a cigar and just sharing back and forth, you know. And it's one of the craziest things. I don't know who got more out of what. I think I got as much, if not more, out of his sharing of being a Vietnam veteran. He's 72 years old this year, you know. So he's old enough to be my dad, you know. But we're sitting there, and he's telling a story about being in country and all the things that he went through during Vietnam, you know, in 1970, 71, I think is when he was in there. But anyway, sharing all those stories and all the relative, you know, being a mechanic, being in, you know, he didn't go out on the front line, but he still had his horror stories, you know, that went along with it. And deal. I think I got more out of it from his story than maybe he did telling it. And then vice versa, you know, I would share with him. We have become really, really close friends, but it's a commonality. Number one, it's a brotherhood. I don't care who you are. You can be anywhere. If you're like me, and I know you are, Yancy, I can see a veteran anywhere, and I've got something in common right away. Like, hey, man, how you doing? I don't care if you're Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, Army National Guard, Army Reserve. You know,
even those former Navy guys.
Yep. You let it. I know you keep us around. But the thing of it is you've already got a commonality ground. I mean, and it's the same way, you know, with Max here. He's a Vietnam veteran, and I'm not a Vietnam era veteran, but we had a common ground right off the bat, you know. So it's something, you know, and it's the same way I'm sure you run into. That's why I think, like you say, it's so important. This is therapeutic for me, doing this, because I can get in contact, and I'm in contact with guys, and I'm running around looking at Jeeps. I mean, how much better can it get for me? Running around, playing with Jeeps, old military Jeeps, and I'm in the heart of probably my favorite part of history, of World War II history, is, you know, the battle here in the Philippines, you know. In Asia, you know, in the Pacific. I really love that portion of the history. I love Vietnam era history. And so now I'm only $125 round trip ticket from Vietnam. You know, so when all this craziness lets up, I'm headed to Vietnam. I'm going to go to Ho Chi Minh City. I'm going to, you know, and Max, me and him had plans for this last May. We were going to meet in Vietnam. One thing we wanted to do was ride a 747, you know, before they go away. Well, you can ride a 747 from here to Vietnam, or from Incheon, Korea to Vietnam. And so we was going to meet in Incheon, Korea, take the 747 right up top, you know, first class, and, you know, before they go away, you know, and then go to the places where he was stationed. Now, I wasn't in Vietnam, so I've had uncles and lots of friends. And so, man, I couldn't imagine standing next to a Vietnam veteran that was in country, standing on the ground where he served, you know. So we was all excited. Of course, then the world changed.
And that's a place, you know, they probably thought they would never go back to, never be able to go back to. So
Absolutely.
being able to do that, of course, it changes things. I had a similar experience with a man. His name was Henry, and Henry was the subject of the second book that I wrote. It's called Medic.
Yep.
That one never really took off. For some reason, it just never did. But I wrote stories about 6 different medics,
right,
in every one of the living wars.
Yep.
So Henry was my pick for World War II. Of course, those guys are getting really hard to find. Henry has since passed away. But Henry conspired with his cousin to forge a letter and notarize it from his mother stating
so he
he'd
could
been
get
born
in the
home.
military.
He enlisted at 15 years old, and was 3 months later was June 6, 1944, Normandy, and he was there at 15 years old. And he fought through the Battle of the Bulge, finished out World War II, came home on the last voyage of the Queen Mary when they were still using it as a troop ship. Of course, it sailed for many more years after that, but it was used as a troop ship up until the end of the war.
Yeah.
And he said the way they did it when you came off of the Queen Mary is they put you into two separate lines. You got into one line if you wanted to re-enlist, and another line if you wanted to get discharged. Wasn't old enough to enlist in the Army when he came home.
But yet he'd served in combat.
Yeah, he'd served in the Battle of the Bulge in Normandy and everything else, been through Europe.
But he wasn't old enough to enlist.
So he went home for 8 or 9 weeks until he was old enough to re-enlist. Then he went back in Army Air Corps. Ended up serving in Korea and Vietnam. He was one of the first Air Force E-9s that was even in existence. And when Desert Storm came along, he was a retired E9 at that time. He had enough connections with the Air Force. He was trying to get back in. And he says, well, whoever heard of a 100-hour war? They were over. It was Desert Storm was over so fast that he couldn't get the paperwork through. But if he had succeeded in getting that paperwork through, he would have been the only American to have fought in all four of those wars.
Yeah, isn't that something?
And he was just an amazing man, but he sat down and told me stories that I know he'd never told another living soul.
Exactly.
And it wasn't because
he wanted
had
it
been
in
to
the
some
book.
of the same places.
Right.
But it didn't even have anything to do with the book. It was like, okay, here's a guy that gets it. Here's a guy that understands
exactly.
it. Because I told him, anything you tell me, if you don't want it going into the book, it doesn't have to. And I gave him, full rights to do that.
Sure.
So I think just being able to tell your story to somebody else that gets it,
exactly.
I think it's therapeutic. It lets you, kind of get past whatever it is and move on. And Henry had a lot of stuff to get past. I mean, 15 years old and watching 90% of his company get wiped out on the beachhead.
Exactly. Well, that's it, Yancy, and you know the statistics as well as I do right now with the veterans and suicide rate. I'm on several Facebook sites that are for veterans, and somebody will say, man, I'm struggling, I can't make it. Here's my phone number, here's my messenger. I don't care. Never met the person. I said, dude, before you ever think about walking across that line of no return, man, call me. I don't care what time it is. I'll talk to you. I may not have been there and done it in the same place you are, but I'm here for you, man. I'm in here. We got to do that. We got to look out for each other. I'm glad to see the changes politically that's happened to improve the veterans facilities. There has been a lot of improvement. There's still a lot of improvement. There's still a lot of things got to be done. But man, I'm telling you that we have to look out for each other. We did when we stood next to each other in the foxhole. We can do it now. I mean, we swore an oath that never ending. So it's the same thing.
I don't remember mine having an expiration
date. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You hear the statistic 22 a day that gets thrown out a lot. What a lot of people don't know is where that number came from. It's been around for several years, but they did some surveys that 22 a day only counts about half the states. It doesn't actually include the entire country. It leaves out some of the big ones like Texas and New York, where there's a whole lot of military veterans that end up. So the real number, I don't think anybody has a handle on that. But 22 a day is a fraction of it.
One is too many. To lose that way. We know our attrition rate is going to go through normal courses of death and illnesses and things. But to lose a brother or sister through suicide, to me is almost intolerable, to the point, that I don't care what I got to do. I want to be there no matter what. And I hope that's what this channel does some too, is being able to, like you and I sharing our story here, and Max, and, even the two young Marines that, they're brand new, they're just done, and I want, the first one is my sister's oldest, second to the youngest boy, and I asked, I said, let's get a young guy on here. All of us old farts running around here, let's get a young guy. And then his friend, that went to basic training was from the same time, same hometown, he asked if he could do it. And I said, man, I'd love to. Even though I'm 56 years old and he's 22 maybe, now, we had something in common. We could sit down and have a conversation, laugh and joke, even about, offline we laughed and joked about basic training and things like that, all the getting picked on and had something in common. It's amazing.
Some things never change,
No.
That's what I found out with talking to a lot of these World War II and Korean vets is that certain aspects of what we did, they don't ever change.
They don't ever change.
And of course, those kids you're talking about, I mean, they're Marines, so you gotta tell, explain all your jokes twice.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, well, we can't. That old Navy joke, you get your paycheck from the Navy, and we're there to give you a ride, right? It's back and forth, and that's why the Navy exists for the Marines.
So nice, they hauled all of my stuff everywhere I went.
Right, but well, Yancy, you're finishing up there actually on your military career now. You did a little bit of a special kind of work and job there for a while that I definitely want you to share a little bit about, because this is not something that everybody gets a chance to hear about. So I think you know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to let you kind of lead in and go and talk about it.
Yeah, when I came back, of course, as soon as I got my 20-year letter in my hand, I had thought I was going to be one of these guys that said, man, I'll stay until they throw me out. Then all of a sudden I read that letter, said, oh, look, I'm out of here, And I went back to my civilian job as a flight nurse, and I did that for, maybe another, I ended up doing it for another year and a half. Mm-hmm. But I started being able to kind of see the writing on the wall. There were a lot of things about that job. Of course, as air EMS, very intense.
It is.
Lots of trauma, lots of things.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, right now I'm suited to do those things because my brain is kind of wired for it. I don't want to be that way forever.
Ever.
I don't want to be 55 years old and climbing up on this helicopter at 2 o'clock in the morning to scrape some drunk kid off the pavement.
Off pavement. Yeah.
And I was just sort of sitting at work one day and just kind of browsing, like, well, what can I do? Jobs for vets or whatever. Trying to figure out some way.
You sound like me going to please.
How do you translate, the experience in doing some of this stuff? And I ran across these jobs with the U.S. State Department, and I thought, well, okay, that it looked like it was one of those things that was just darn near impossible to get. So I wasn't all that serious about it. Mm-hmm. But, you click on the click, and then you go to the right page. I had to sign up to take the Foreign Service test, which that year about 25,000 people took the test.
Wow.
And only about 10,000 of them passed it. So the way that process worked was that you took the test. This test was free. I had to go to St. Louis or somewhere to take it. I don't remember where. But basically, I was invested about a day.
Yep.
And I didn't think much more about it. And about 6 weeks later, I got an email from the State Department that said we have some interview-style questions that we'd like for you to fill out. And that was, phase 2 of the process.
Right.
They sent 6 questions, and they were all, basically things like name a time when you were challenged to do this or that or whatever. Very basic sort of job interview style questions that there's no real right or wrong answer for. But what they expected was a one-page response to each one of those questions. Mm-hmm. So I sat down again at work. Yeah. When you're working EMS, you're waiting for the call.
You're just sitting there waiting for the call. You're burning time.
You're sitting there waiting for the buzzer to ring. So I'm sitting there and I'm typing all of this out. And I sent that in, and I didn't hear anything for maybe 2 more months. And then I got another email that said, we want you to come to D.C. Because now I had passed the first 2 phases. Of it, and what I had to do was go to Washington, D.C. to do what they call the Foreign Service Oral Assessment.
Okay.
And what that process was, if you've ever seen the movie Men in Black, where Will Smith is sitting in a little big chair, and he's breaking the pencil, and he's trying to take the test, and there's all these guys, It felt a lot like that. You know, and a lot of those the specifics of the test are very well, you know, protected. So it's things that I can't talk about.
Sure,
but
sure, understand that.
the format of the test is something like you put 6 people that don't know each other, you sit them down at the table, everybody gets a folder of information in front of them. You get 20 minutes to absorb as much of what's in that folder as you possibly can, and then you discuss the issue at the table, understanding that your folder contains different information than everyone else's folder. So what they're doing is they're observing people and their ability to make an argument or interact with very limited information. I had to do the same thing. Here's 40 pages of information with an impossible human resources style problem. We have to cut the budget. We have to fire this person and that person.
Right.
How do we make that decision based on this information?
Yeah.
And you're going to write a 3-page memo explaining your decision, and you got 90 minutes. Go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually failed both of those portions. There are 3 sections of the oral assessment. I failed 2 of them. And the third section was a 2-on-1 interview. 2 of them, me.
You, yeah.
They're firing questions back and forth while the other person's taking little notes about kind of whatever observations that they have about the person.
Right.
And I knew at that point I kind of thought I had blown the whole thing. And thought, well, I've traveled all the way up here to D.C. I've spent a little money.
Now
I've blown the whole thing.
Just relax, do it.
Now
and it was the best interview.
You bet. Now I'm in a mode, and I guess that's where I needed to be, because I still remember the lady asked me a question about an ethical, if I had ever faced an ethical dilemma and how I dealt with it. And I told her a story about a child that had come into the combat hospital as a burn victim. And our protocol says if a person was burned over 60% of their body, that you weren't to treat them. You were simply to give them pain relief. The Iraqis have no capability of taking care of burn victims. Now, if that person had come into a hospital in the United States, absolutely, especially being a child, you do everything in the world that you can.
Right.
But in a situation where, you know, we're in the middle of a big, dirty, dusty country like that, the truth is a child has a lot less chance of making it than an adult does.
Right.
So the protocol said we have to just give the child pain relief and
comfort them, hold them.
The inevitable happens. And that decision, that was a decision I would have made, but it was a really tough one to do. That decision ultimately got overridden by another person who said, no, we can't do that. We can't give up on this kid. We got to do everything we can.
Right.
I said, okay, well, that's a violation of every order that we've got, but you know what? If you want to pick that hill to die on, you go for it, because I'm not going to say that's wrong.
Right.
There's really no answer to how that situation, how do you make a right decision? There's no right decision.
There's no right decision on that. Yeah.
And at the time that I had a child at home that was the same age.
Same age. Yeah.
And the lady in the interview, she asked me, she said, so if you had that decision again to make, how would you make that decision? And I looked at her and I said, the very idea of an ethical dilemma is there's no right answer. I said, I don't want to make that decision ever again. I hope I never have to be faced with something like that, because that's what it means. An ethical dilemma isn't just, oh, do I do this or do I do that?
Right.
And I told her that story, and these folks, when you see them, they're very robotic, very non-emotional.
Right.
We are here to observe you.
Stickler suit and tie.
Professional folks. Yeah. Absolutely. And I almost had that woman in tears, which was something she told me later after the test was over, and they can be real people again. She told me that no one had ever pulled that kind of emotional response out of her before. I scored very highly in the personal interview section, which ended up being enough to drag up my failing 2 scores in the other 2 sections. And I filled out all the security clearance packet, and about 2 or 3 months later, they offered me a job, and I ended up picking up the entire family. And 6 weeks later, we were in Washington D.C., and I was in I was in language school learning Spanish.
Yep.
Now, and I'll tell you, learning a foreign language at 38 years old or 40, whatever it was,
It is
I don't
not
know.
good. It's not
It
easy.
is not good. I'm like, I have done a lot of very educational things in my life. I consider myself an intelligent person, but when you learn another language, you're dumber than a box of hammers.
I always said that I could assemble a rope unit before I could learn a foreign language. You know, uh,
You know, it's absolutely right. I mean, I could tear apart my HVAC system and not be intimidated by
I
that.
know it.
Oh, Espanol, I'll tell you that.
Yep.
But they sent language training. I was a vice consul for 2 years in Lima, Peru.
Wow.
Phenomenal country if you ever get a chance to
Yeah.
go there.
Yeah.
If you're a food junkie,
Yeah.
they have the most amazing food I've been
I know it.
anywhere in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. And you
Every
know, and
every state's different, and they merge it with whatever culture that they're
culture.
around, and
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's
you get
amazing, isn't
food
it?
possibilities.
Yeah.
So I was there for 2 years, and then I came back, and I went to the Bahamas for 2 more years as a political economic advisor.
Ah.
And then I did that. Basically, what I was doing for the most part is I was helping United States businesses that sought to do business in the Bahamas.
Oh, okay. All right.
The U.S. is still the Bahamas' largest trading partner. China's pretty close.
Right.
But when U.S. businesses would go there, they would need a little bit of a tour guide. There were a lot of things about their business that they would know, but I would try to get them involved with the ins and outs of understanding the Bahamian culture, the Bahamian political system,
Right.
the way the rules were going to apply to their particular business, the things
Right.
that they would have to understand before they could do business there. I mean, there was a guy there that wanted to export ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Now, selling ice cream in the Bahamas sounds like a wonderful idea because, hey, it's hot, people want ice cream, and they did. They would eat ice cream.
Yeah.
But the problem was the cost of electricity, about 45 cents a kilowatt.
Yep.
You have to refrigerate all that stuff. Ice cream's not very cost effective if you're shipping a container of it
Exactly.
and having to store it very long. I mean, there were a whole lot of logistics issues
Right.
that were involved in that. Those were the kind of things that I helped
Okay.
U.S. business owners figure out, things
Sure.
that they didn't necessarily know on their own,
Mm-hmm.
or saying, hey, if you're going to do this type of business, you need to understand who your competition is, the political forces at play. Bahamas is kind of a small island,
It
so
is.
obviously,
Yep.
who's who you are matters.
Exactly.
In a place
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that was what I did for 2 more years. And then it started to look like I was going to get assigned back to Washington, D.C. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there are crazy people that live in Washington, D.C. And I enjoyed what I did with the Foreign Service, but
You wasn't ready to go live in Washington D.C. and live amongst the political
I've been there
elite.
for a year, and it's like I can't live there permanently. And plus, my kids were reaching the age. My daughters were reaching the age. They're starting to look at boys.
Yeah.
And I really didn't want to be in a position where putting a boy at the bottom of the Potomac didn't scare me at all. But the idea that they're going to find somebody and fall in love, and then they're going to be all over the world, and they'll be halfway around the world. I never get to see my grandkids.
Exactly.
I didn't want to be in that situation either. So I ended up coming back to Missouri after 5 years with the State Department. But I'll tell you, it was a heck of a ride. And now I'm self-employed. I flip houses, and I do a little bit of light construction work for different people as I feel like it. I work when I want, how I want.
That's cool.
I eat a lot of macaroni and cheese, but I'm probably happier now than I've ever been in my life in terms of what am I doing. And that's the secret to life right there. Man, eat macaroni and cheese, eat ramen noodles, live in a cardboard box if that's what you have to. If you're happy, the pursuit of happiness, man, that's where it's at.
That's what I keep telling a lot of the guys. A lot of people. Long, short, quick to the story. With me, when I left the unit, I went back to the reserve side. There and acting first sergeant, acting jack. And back in an instructor battalion. And it was good, but it just wasn't there anymore. And so I ended up, was following some medical stuff, after I left the LSB. I was following some medical stuff, and anyway, ended up getting med retired. Now, came out, and went back in through the VA and done all that system through there, and put up with all that garbage, and So I got picked up under voc rehab and to go to college. And you know, as we was out processing there at Fort Riley, they said, you know, hey, put down what you want to do. You know, you got Montgomery GI Bill, blah blah blah. You know, the post 9/11 bill, all this stuff. You know, so you know, I said pilot training. You know, and he said, we ain't done that since Vietnam era. You know, you can use a certain amount of it. You know, in your commercial, but they don't do private. They don't do da 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 da. Da, you know, and I said, well, you asked me what I want to do. I don't want to go assemble ink pens. I don't want to learn anything. You know, that kind of deal. You know, this is what you asked me what I want to do, so put it down. But anyway, long story of the story came, I got it. And so I went back to college for 5 years there at K-State in Salina and done pilot program. I ended up doing pilot and some maintenance stuff there. But what I got into was avionics and avionics and airport safety and operations management. And so I was able to take a bunch of my stuff from the military and transfer over, what do you know, like you say, what do you do with all this stuff? You know, you got a degree
Right.
you got a degree in basket weaving, but where do you apply it at? You know, and so I was doing that, and I said, man, I went back to work. Actually, was full time student for a while, and then I also was full time employed. Kansas Army National Guard offered me a position, a civilian position. I took over general manager for Nickel Hall there in Salina, the regional training center, the Kansas Army National Guard Regional Training Center. Managed the hotel and the DFAC dining facility there, and so that was really cool. But my interviews were kind of like yours, you know. I was at the point, you know, I really didn't. I was taking the job and did the interview as a favor to a W-4 that was my E5 when I first went in the military in my National Guard. When I first went in at 16 years old, you know, to get long enough to get there to go to basic training, right? You know, I came in on.
Yeah, one of my guys just made full colonel. I mean, they grow up so fast.
I know it, you know, and it's like, okay, and, you know, the W-4 chief there, he says, man, I need somebody to do it, you know, and then basically it was kind of an ethical questions in a sense. It was all over government impact credit card. And if you remember what the LSB went through on them impact cards, on the guys out there on in the deal and all the purchasing and all the things. So it was kind of the same thing. That's what got me the job, because she said, well, what's your experience with the government impact card? I said, I was an impact card holder. And this is the story of the LSB, and this is what we did, you know. And then we went to the deal, and that's how I got the job. So I was full time, and then we had a month off. This was the heart of training. It was just really phasing down for Iraq and Afghanistan, you know. So National Guard wasn't pushing near as many people through. So we closed for a month from the 5th of December all the way to the 5th of January. So I decided I was going to go to Belize for a month and just kick back, have a good time, you know, and just enjoy it. So I did, went down there, and I had talked to some people online, and I had made a trip down once before for just a couple, 4 or 5 days, you know, and spent some time there, and went out, you know, to the island, you know, and done a few things, you know, just the touristy stuff, you know, and then so made and had met one of the guys at the airport there. His name was Delvin Castillo. Long story of the story, he was the operations manager for the Belize Airports Authority. And so we just traded business cards. And I said, if you ever need anything, da da da. Well, he offered for us to stay at his house that whole month while we was down there. So he did. When it got all said and done and over with, I was home it was about May. I was just starting to do, I had made a couple trips back and forth even after that, and took windsocks down because back then I could still fly on United Airlines under companion passes with a real good friend of mine that worked for United Airlines. And so I could fly for $25-$30 down to Belize, right? And so I took some windsocks, different things like that, back and forth to them. And they offered me a job, and it was like, I'm finishing my deal, and I don't want to leave my school. I got 6 months left. They said, we need you now. We want you to take over. They're building a new airport there, and they needed a ICAO certified safety officer for the airport project. And I said, man, long story short, I got to do an internship, finished up, graduated in Belize. But I just found myself, you know, as life progressed, things changed. I ended up, you know, sold everything in Belize, packed 4 suitcases, and moved to the Philippines. And you know, I'm 56 years old, but I'm not going to live like I'm 56. You know what I mean? I can still get up, I can still walk around, I can still move, and I'm still going, and I'm going to go out there and enjoy life. Whether, like you say, I'm eating ramen noodles every day or rice and beans or whatever it may be, but I'm going to go out there and enjoy life. I'm going to do what I want to do. We've worked too hard, we went too long, and we've seen, you know, we shed our blood, we shed our time, and now it's time to enjoy it. And I see so many veterans not doing that. Man, they just got to step up, step out there, and do what they need to do. But you know, enjoy life. We've put in our time.
Yeah, I think you know what a lot of folks don't realize is that when they're when they're trying to be successful. Like, what exactly does that even mean?
Anymore.
I mean, successful means that I get up in the morning and I do what I want to do.
Exactly.
Yep. And I think it doesn't necessarily mean that I drive the car that I think is going to make me look cool. Or,
exactly.
I think we try to surround ourselves with all the trappings of success. And the truth is that, I get up every day and I enjoy the work that I do every day. I mean, it's physical. Sure. I mean, I was always kind of a woodworker guy. It was sort of a hobby that I did. Yeah. I mean, I GC'd my own house back in the early 90s, and I can't really say as I was all that successful at it, but, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And, I've always liked to fool around with, like, furniture and just, I'll build or try to fix just about anything. I'm not afraid of tools.
There you go. Yeah.
But I thought to myself, you know what, I'll buy one of these houses and see if I can't fix it up and flip it.
Yeah.
And I had so much fun. Didn't really make a whole lot of money on the first one.
Right.
I mean, a little bit. It was. I probably would have done better if I'd got a job at McDonald's at minimum wage for 6 months. But it was. I learned a lot in the process, and I had fun every day
doing it.
I got up and I went to work, and I loved what I was doing.
Yeah.
And no boss except for myself, and sometimes that's hard because I could give myself a day off.
Yeah.
But you got to make yourself get up and do it.
Exactly.
But the truth is, I do a lot of work for other people, and I've got a buddy that I served with about 25 years ago. He and I kind of partnered up, and we just go do carpenter work for people.
Yep.
And our business model is kind of we work a lot for older people.
Yeah.
And finding somebody to do small jobs is really hard. Maybe they need somebody to put up a ceiling fan or do something else.
It is.
Well, can you give us an estimate to do this or that or whatever? And I said, look, here's the deal. I said, I'll do anything. I said, I'll build anything. I don't care what it is.
Right.
I don't care for doing drywall, but I will. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I tell people, make a list.
Right.
This is our daily rate. If you hire us for a day, we'll do anything on the list.
Yeah.
If you're happy with the work and you feel like we're getting enough stuff done, we'll do whatever for another day.
Yep.
The guy that we're working for right now, we've been with him for 7 weeks. Started out working for him for 2 days.
Yeah.
And it's just been, well, can you do this? Can you do this? Yeah, we can. You know what our daily rate is. Just keep on plugging.
Yep.
And I won't bid the by the job thing because I feel like I'm either screwing them or I'm going to screw myself.
Right.
And I just say, as long as you're happy with what we're doing, and in day you're not, then we can just call it good, and I'll go work somewhere else.
Exactly, yeah.
We've been doing it now for 3 years, and I don't even have business cards.
Yeah.
Every customer that we've had has been a direct referral from another customer we've had, and that's just the way to go.
And, all in all, that's the best way to have, because the referral, is coming from someone who the person is getting good work quality done before, so they're referring you. So
absolutely,
your work is your
advertisement.
And
it brings me an incredible amount of joy to see somebody, especially the guy that we're with now, that is our primary customer now, is he's building his own house. He's been building his own house for a couple of years. Yep. They've had a lot of things really go bad. They've had a lot of people do bad work for them.
Yep.
And once that happens for a certain amount of time, you just get heartbroken over the deal.
Yes, absolutely.
Since we've been on the job, it's like he's singing to himself, he's smiling more.
Well, that's good.
His wife comes in and she's smiling from ear to ear.
Yeah, absolutely.
It brings me a lot of joy.
Absolutely.
To be able to bring that joy to somebody else, and it's like, okay, I don't even have to think about. I still miss the Army, but I don't have to think about the medical field at all.
Right.
I don't get blood on my hands unless it's my own.
Yeah.
You know what they say, it's like rock, paper, scissors, table saw.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Yancy, I first of all, I just want to thank you so much for taking time to spend time with us today and sharing. I've been looking forward to it. Plug the 2 books again real quick, names and where to find them at. Let's get that here real quick.
You bet. Northwest of Eden and Medic, the Complete Collection. Both of those books are available on Amazon. I'll shoot you a copy of the link, but there's nothing else out there named Northwest of Eden. It's a little bit of a play on words. because the biblical Garden of Eden was supposed to be at the junction of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and we were northwest of that, so that's kind of how I named it.
Named it. Cool. Well, great.
But I'll get you a link to that.
You bet. I look forward to it, and man, just thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it. It's been good catching up with you. It's been too many years.
Yeah,
We don't have to be, and when you have vacation time, you have a place to stay, and I have a cold one in the refrigerator for you. So you're welcome here anytime. You and your family, brother, come on over, and when this travel opens up again, where we can actually do something again. But
no kidding. And you're welcome to come up and spend some time in my wood shop.
We will. We're planning on doing about a 3 or 4 month trip here coming up, when things open up again here where we can, so I'm definitely going to make the rounds down through and like so. Well, Yancy, once again, thank you so much. I salute you for standing with us, sir, and your service, and very, very proud to say I have served with you and worked for you in the S4 and the S3 shop. We worked together quite well together when we were there, and I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed our friendship and continue to today. So stay strong, be there with us, and once again, thank you for your service, and thank you for sharing with us today. I appreciate it, Yancy, very much, and I know everybody that does that. You bet. Well, guys and gals, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and with Captain Yancy Caruthers, retired U.S. Army. We appreciate his service and time, and you guys make sure you like, subscribe, share the video, put it out there on your Facebook. That's how other vets see us. That's how we get an opportunity to share what we're doing and get them on and get them to share too. So once again, you guys have a great one, and we're out of here.